Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help you recognise and unlock the entrepreneur skills in your business. In this week's episode, I am very pleased to be interviewing Roger Fairhead. Roger is a leadership speaker and author. He's created his own model, which is called prize-winning leadership, helping difference makers make a difference. I adore that tagline, and I'd really like to steal it, but I suspect you'll know that I've stolen it, as I've admitted it's not mine now. Of course, Roger and I will be talking about leadership and introversion. But first, there's Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts are quiet. Well, I was in a few social media discussions about this recently. It's always one that makes me smile. The answer, of course, is, as somebody said to me on social media, of course it's true. Wouldn't you be quiet if there was nothing important to say and nobody important wanting to listen? The real answer, of course, is no. Introverts are not quiet. They may choose not to say a lot when others around them are filling the void. But when it's important, when there's something that needs saying, and often that something is controversial and wants data and information to back it up, an introvert will happily say it. So yeah, it's a myth that can go in the bin. Although considering people energy and internal processing features of introverts and how they may slow down some conversations, I can see where the myth comes from. Do let me know what introvert myth you'd like exposed, or what tip you'd like that would help you to activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business. I'd also love to hear your feedback about this series on the Apple iTunes Store or podchaser.com. Please take a moment after the show. And finally, if you'd like to talk to me about speaking at your conference, virtual or face-to-face, or working with your team, I'd love to hear from you. But now, let's get on with this week's interview. Welcome, Roger.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for your time today. You've got this model about leadership, and I know when we were talking about it, you kind of explained why it's called prize winning, which is brilliant. Tell us a little bit about leadership in a minute, but first I always ask people, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And what does that mean to you?
Well, I think in answer to your question, John, which is really interesting, I find that I'm 6 1/2 Sometimes I'm an introvert, sometimes I'm an extrovert. I think at heart, I'm an introvert. So at the end of a long, hard day, I like to get on my own. If I come back in from a speaking engagement or something, I want to get on my own, just sit with my own thoughts and recharge the batteries. But during the day, when I'm out at events, I often feel like an extrovert, that I really want to connect with people. I get energy from chatting with people. So I think during the day, during events, whilst I'm cooking on gas, as it were, then I'm an extrovert. But when it comes down to it at the end of the day, I settle back at home as an introvert.
That's really interesting. You mentioned two of the classic traits of introvert, and you've got a different take on each one. So the energy piece, a very common one, but the out and about and wanting to contact. I know many introverts who are very, very happy once they get out to start chatting to people like you do, but there's that definite, I need to recharge afterwards. So thank you for that. So Roger, tell us a bit about prize-winning leadership.
Well, prize-winning leadership came from really from a good number of years of experience in the leadership environment. Now, I started my career in engineering. I was managing engineering projects for many, many years. I started to discover that, well, engineers are really, really good with things, but that they're not very good with people. And I found that you can manage things, but you need to lead people. And I found there was a key differentiator between success and failure usually had a lot to do with effective leadership skills, which is when I started to really dig into and start to learn, do some research, ask questions of my colleagues about things to do with leadership. And over the years, there were a number of hallmarks that came out that kind of settled into a model that I've now called prize-winning leadership, which has helped me to understand the leadership journey. Beginning of leadership, which is about getting a vision, getting a passion, getting a mission, through to influencing people in an ethical, genuine way, so that they will want to get involved with that vision. And then about implementing the vision. How do you make it happen? How do you make your vision become a reality?
Wow, so there's a lot packed in there. And so as we talk about leadership, I guess for me, this is me checking in with a leadership expert, for me, the most important thing is about how you inspire other people, because that leads, I guess, to influencing others.
Absolutely. So influencing others, you need to, one of the things I found was really fascinating, that you can't get people to change their behavior simply by trying to get them to change their behavior. And that's because our behavior is based on our attitudes and emotions, which are based on our values, which are then ultimately based on our beliefs. So if we want to influence people to change their behavior and do something differently, to turn self-development into self-development, then we need to find a way of connecting with them at that layer beneath the behavior. Either we get into the emotions and the attitudes, or maybe we get below that into the values. But we need to find a way of connecting with them in such a way that the behavior, which is simply the manifestation of what's going on underneath, happens in the way that we'd like to see it happen.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does that overlay onto different personality types? Of course, introvert, extrovert being the classic one we'll come back to.
Well, absolutely. There's a number of different things that motivate people. Different people are motivated by different things. We know that. We see that around us. Some people are motivated by wealth and the trappings of wealth. Other people are influenced or motivated by the ability to do what they want to do, the freedom to do what they want to do. So I find it really important to not only understand somebody's personality style, so the introvert, the extrovert, the judging, all that kind of territory, the Myers-Briggs stuff, the DISC territory, those kind of things. But it's also important to understand the things that motivate them, the things that make them, that for them turn the have to into the want to. So when they get up in the morning, they don't have to do this thing, they want to do this thing.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, and that have to into want to. So that's a really great phrase. It kind of reminds me of something I often say to people. I hope you're going to agree here, but I often say you cannot motivate somebody else. You can only inspire them because they have to motivate themselves.
I think it's to do with understanding the things that will motivate them. I could come along with a whole, and in the sales environment, it's fascinating. I spent a number of years in sales. One of the most important things in sales is not to try and sell the thing that you think they ought to want, but to find out what it is they really want and sell that thing to them. Now that might be, it might be the obvious item, but it might be the thing that the item brings. It might be the trappings of the thing. So when they've bought this thing, it gives them a feeling of status. That might be the thing that they want to purchase, actually. And by purchasing this thing, it gives them the status. So the thing isn't always the object they're buying.
No, that makes a lot of sense as well. Thank you. I guess in a traditional sense, we might be sitting there assuming that the leader actually might be introverted or extroverted, but you might have some introverted staff. You're an employee and you want to help your leader. What can you do there?
Well, I think for how does an introvert get the best out of somebody else who is maybe of a different personality style? I think the very first thing that we need to recognize, and this can be one of the most difficult steps, is to recognize that other people are different, that we're not all the same. And the things that motivate me are not going to be the things that motivate somebody else. The things that influence me are not going to be the things that influence somebody else. And what we need to remember is it's not about me. Motivation is not about me. Motivation is about understanding the other person, understanding their language, understanding their preferences.
Okay, so as an introvert, very much remembering it's about other people's preferences. And if I was a perhaps non-introverted leader trying to influence the introverts in my team, what might I do there?
Well, I think I heard a fabulous quote from Patrick Lencioni recently. He said, I'm getting fed up with the whole dialogue about servant leadership. Is there any other kind? And I thought that was a fascinating observation, because actually leaders, the common misperception is that leaders are there to stand out in front and follow me because I know exactly where I'm going. But actually a leader is there to engage with, to to relate to the team, to help them to want to go where the leader wants them to go, to help to influence them to want to pursue that same goal, that same objective.
That I certainly agree with. Definitely. So, Roger, we are running out of time, I'm afraid. We could talk forever on this subject, I'm absolutely sure. If some of the listeners want to get back in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, there's two great ways. The first is on my website. Just pop along to rogerfairhead.com. The other is by email. It's roger@rogerfairhead.com.
Fantastic. And I'll put a link to your website in the sleeve notes for this episode so people can do that just by clicking. Roger, you have been an absolute star. Thank you very much for your time. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks, John.
And so it's time for the leadership tip of the week. The tip for people that are leading introverts and want to get more from their whole team, introvert, extrovert, and everything in between. This week's tip is about spending more time listening actively. That's not just listening, but listening so others know you're listening and with your mind focused on what you're listening to. As a leader, as a manager, it's really important your team know that you are listening to them. Remote meetings may increase the temptation to multitask when listening, and let's face it, I think we've all been tempted by that one lately. But with a camera pointed at your face, it is actually easier to see than when you're not fully focused in the same room. So here's the 3 Ds of active listening. Display. That's about body language and non-verbals to display that you're listening. Dedicate. Dedicate your mind to listening. Listen to understand. Even if you don't like what you're hearing, you're not looking to rebut the points, you're looking to understand them. The 3rd D is demonstrate. Demonstrate that you were listening. Summarise the main points. Ask questions to clarify. Because if your team know that you're listening, that's going to increase their ability and their willingness to work with you. For more on improving your active listening and your leadership in meetings, you can read the book that I published about a month ago, Running Meetings That Make Things Happen. Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.